Well, I'm not really a pirate. I just play one on television. People call us that. But the reason they call us that is because we oppose illegal activities, and our opponents try to demonize us by giving us names like eco-terrorists or pirate or whatever. I don't really have a problem with the word pirate because history has shown that pirates got things done. If you had a problem, call a pirate. The pirates seem to get a bad reputation, but really when you look at the history, they're very democratic societies. They're very, very influential pirates in history. You have Robert Surcouf in France, got the Legion of Honor. You got Sir Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh in England. John Paul Jones, the founder of the United States Navy, was a pirate. Jean Lafitte, who stood with Andrew Jackson to defend New Orleans, was a pirate. Henry Morgan, who drove the pirates out of Panama, he was a pirate. Actually didn't become a real pirate until he became governor of Jamaica, and that's what we have today, pirates running the world's economies. Those are the real pirates. I actually look on myself as a conservative. I'm trying to maintain nature's status quo, and the radicals are destroying our planet, destroying our oceans, destroying our forests. We're on a runaway train right now that's just going faster and faster, heading towards a solid wall where it's going to collide. And on that train, humans are passengers who are really having a great time, big party, but doing nothing to slow down the train. And when it hits the wall, that's going to be a very catastrophic and traumatic time in human history. It might even be the end of human history. We don't know. But unless we find real solutions to the problems that we're facing, then the outlook doesn't look very good. Climate change, of course, is one of the problems, but I think that the most important issue is the fact that we're destroying biodiversity on the planet. And it is biodiversity that keeps everything running, especially in the ocean. For millions of years, the ocean has worked to maintain an ecological equilibrium on the planet, so that it controls and regulates weather, it provides food, it produces over 50% of the oxygen that we breathe. And in that case, since 1950, we've destroyed 40% of the phytoplankton, which produces the oxygen. And the reason we've destroyed the phytoplankton is we've destroyed the whales, and the whales provide the nutrients for the phytoplankton. We just simply don't understand the mechanisms that biodiversity provides to maintain security on the planet, ecological security. We're destroying that mechanism by killing off the crew members that run it. And that's going to have some consequences. And we're actually seeing those consequences materialize now. At the recent climate change conference in Paris, they didn't address any of these issues. In fact, I'm sort of trying to figure out just exactly what they were trying to accomplish. The final paper they put out didn't really mention the ocean at all. It didn't mention fossil fuels. It didn't really come up with any solutions, and it's not even going to be ratified till 2020. They keep throwing this word about sustainable development. Well, there's no such thing as sustainable development. Sustainable is just a catchphrase for, well, business as usual. So until we get serious about addressing these issues, then the outlook doesn't look that promising. However, I think that at some point, humanity will see that there is a need for real solutions, and we may just get serious in time to save ourselves. There are many species that are what we call keystone species that are absolutely essential for a healthy ecological system. In the ocean, we have whales and their relationship to phytoplankton. We have sharks and the prey-predator relationship, which over hundreds of millions of years has actually molded the evolution of fish and other species in the sea. If you remove the apex predators, you cause ecological chaos within that system. On the land, the wolf is an apex predator. And the wolf is actually a species that we can learn a lot from, because they're one of the few species that can really control their own populations through a hierarchy within each wolf pack, where only the alpha male can impregnate the alpha female, and the other wolves do not reproduce. So therefore, a wolf pack maintains its numbers as something humans actually could take a lesson from. Wolves change the course of rivers in the wilderness situations. They keep the prey that they go after, the caribou, the deer, or whatever, they keep them healthy, they keep them strong. So they're absolutely essential for a healthy ecological system. And it's really sheer ecological stupidity to remove wolves from our ecosystems. And we've removed them from over 95% of their indigenous range throughout the world. We've driven many of them, many species, to extinction. I think there's about 8 species that have been driven to extinction so far. And that has consequences. Traditions are a real problem because traditions are really illogical and go contrary to the ecological reality that we have to live within, because people refuse to adapt. And when any species does not adapt, doesn't survive. And humans have this ability to adapt to diminishment, but that's pretty much it. They don't seem to be able to adapt in a positive way. The removal of wolves, for example, is only being done because of pressure on politicians from ranchers and farmers. And in fact, if they look at the bigger picture, they'll find that the wolves will maintain a healthier ecological system and therefore would be to the benefit of the ranchers and the farmers overall. I've always had this attitude that when people ask me, what should we teach our children, my response is usually nothing. You don't need to teach them anything. Children have an intuitive understanding of what the situation is. Ask any 6-year-old about anything, well, like whales or sharks or dinosaurs, and they know more about it than you do. And they have this understanding of how the world works. What we do with our educational systems is we take intelligent children and turn them into adult idiots. And I've seen this over and over again, where they go through the educational system and come out not really knowing much, and even worse, not even caring about anything. Young children, before they're exposed to the educational system, are caring, sensitive, intuitive, imaginative, and our school systems remove all of those virtues from them and turn them into, robotic members of society. I think that when you really look at the history of piracy, you find something rather astonishing, that they were the first democratic societies way back in the 17th century, really democratic societies. Blackbeard, for example, used to attack slaving ships, and he would release the slaves and actually give them 2 choices. 1, they could go ashore, or 2, they could have an opportunity to join his crews. African slaves were able to rise in the hierarchy of the vessels based on their merit, on their abilities, which was something completely unheard of back at that time. When people, it always just strikes me funny when people say, well, the pirates in the Caribbean were all thieves. No, they weren't. They actually did steal from the Spanish, but who were the bigger thieves? The Spanish. They had stolen the gold from the Aztec and the Incas and melted it down and destroyed their cultures. The pirates didn't destroy anybody's cultures. They simply preyed upon those who were destroying the cultures of the indigenous people. So to me, in that respect, they were quite heroic. I actually don't look at what things are going to be in the future. I mainly work upon what's happening in the present. Back in 1973, when I was a medic in the village of Wounded Knee, which was being occupied by the American Indian Movement, and I was working with the American Indian Movement, we were surrounded by 2,000 U.S. federal troops. They were shooting 20,000 rounds a night at us. And I said to Russell Means, who was the leader of the American Indian Movement, I said, well, we don't have any hope. We're not going to win. We're completely surrounded. We're outgunned, everything. Why are we here? And Russell looked at me and says, well, we're not here because we're going to win. In fact, we don't really care if we win or lose. That's not the point. We're here because that's what we have to do. We have to do the right thing, the just thing. And we're not concerned about the fact that the odds are overwhelming against us. We're here to do what must be done. And I think that's the way we have to look at the environmental and conservation movement, is we have to do what must be done, and we can't be concerned about the odds against us, because if we were concerned, we would be overwhelmed. It simply looks impossible. Our focus, our goal, is to achieve the impossible. And I think the impossible can be achieved through a combination of passion, imagination, and courage. In 1972, the very idea that Nelson Mandela would become president of South Africa was unthinkable and thus impossible. And yet the impossible became possible. And I think that that holds true for any movement. You can make the impossible possible. Well, as long as you have life, you have hope, and that's the reality. You know, I look upon what we're doing, really, this movement that we have, as a movement to protect humanity. We're not here to protect the planet. The planet will take care of itself. It always has, and it always will. There's been 5 major extinction events in the history of this planet, the last one being 65.2 million years ago. And now we're in the midst of the 6th major extinction, called the Anthropocene, because we as humans are responsible for it. Well, we either find a way to resolve it or we don't. And if we don't, well, it takes about 18 to 20 million years for the planet to recover from a major extinction event. So 18 to 20 million years from now, it'll be a very nice place around here. So we won't be here, but the planet will be. So this is really about protecting humanity from ourselves. And that's really what we have to focus on. And if we undermine biodiversity, we're going to undermine interdependence, and we're going to diminish finite resources to the point where we won't be able to survive. The answer will be found within the next century, for sure. You know, when the population, when I was born on the planet, was 3 billion people. It's now 7.5 billion people. That can't continue to rise. You know, it's impossible to go over 10 or 12 billion people. That won't happen. There will be an ecological collapse before that happens, which will drastically reduce human populations. So therefore, if we care about our children or our grandchildren at all, we should find some way of making sure they don't suffer those consequences.